Welcome to the Go Reflect Yourself podcast, bringing you real strategies to cultivate the life and business of your dreams, full of freedom and fulfillment, starting from the inside out. Working hard and staying busy will only get you so far. To truly become happy, content, and who you're meant to be, we have to move beyond physical capacities and begin to look from within. We have to change our thoughts and our mindset into our most powerful assets, transforming you to take inspired action so you can become a better version of yourself and to have the life of your dreams.
You are stronger than you believe. You have greater powers than you know.
Welcome to Go Reflect Yourself. My name is Heather J. Crider. I am your host. And thank you for being here. If this is your first time, I'd like to welcome you. If you've been here before, welcome back. Go Reflect Yourself is all about what you think, how your thoughts and your words really impact your life, your success, your happiness, your fulfillment. It's really being able to take simple strategies and turn them into nuggets of useful information that can help you achieve any goal that you desire. It is strictly about you achieving your goals and having joy and happiness. Really that simple. We talk about neuroscience, we talk about mindfulness, and lots of other things that help us to be successful people. And today I have a very special guest. Robert Waldman is going to be joining us in just a moment. And Mark is one of my very favorite people in the world. He has not only helped me personally, but helped me professionally. And one of the people that really has started me down the road in understanding and learning more about neuroscience and mindfulness and how all those things wrap together in our life. Mark has also helped me in neuro coaching, and he's created a whole program and written so many books. This is actually one of my favorite books, NeuroWisdom. And let me just read to you because there's so many that I've lost track. But one of the best-selling books of Words Can Change Your Brain, Born to Believe, How Enlightenment Changes Your Brain, and of course, NeuroWisdom. We're going to talk today about your thoughts and your experience and why that's important to you in really managing your anxiety, managing your stress, and managing your desires so that way you can accomplish whatever you want to accomplish. Now, knowing Mark, we are going to get into some guided experiences because those are what really help deep seed our brain and our bodies to be able to transform into better fulfilled beings. So join me for our very special guest today. And we bring in now Mark Waldman. And I'm so honored that you're here, Mark. Thank you for coming in. I've talked about you in the past, and I haven't told you that just yet, but you've been a huge mentor of mine and a huge part of my life. And I was looking through my notes earlier. We met officially in person in 2014. So time has been flying, and I'm now very honored that you're here with us and you can share more with the world of some of the greatness and goodies that you have. So the title, sorry, I'm ready to jump right in.
Well, I'm just happy to be here with you. Yeah, we've known each other for a long time in so many contexts. And it's always fun to just, put our two heads together, and we either don't have enough time, we have too much time, but it's nice for us to slip into the state of timeless conversation. So I'm delighted that you invited me.
I love it. I love it. The power of our thoughts and the power of our experience. So you have a significant amount of knowledge and a wealth of experience yourself, and being able to really help people get a good handle and grip on the power of our thoughts. And can you explain first, because we have so much to talk about, but can you explain first, just briefly, the word mindfulness and the importance and how that relates to the power of our thoughts.
Well, in the 1970s, John Kabat-Zinn decided to take some of the meditation strategies from the East, in particular, a particular kind of insight meditation where you would just sit back and instead of doing anything or concentrating on a sound or a movement or a bell, there's 10,000 different forms of meditation. There's one particular practice where you sit back and you watch all of different thoughts and feelings and sensations and memories that are consciously floating in and out of your mind. And as you sit back here in one part of your brain, watching all these thoughts and feelings that are going on in other parts of your brain, sometimes you have this remarkable experience. Oh my goodness, I'm not my thoughts. There's this part of my mind that's thinking in this way, but I'm sitting here being aware of watching my mind. And then you might go, uh-oh, I'm now noticing that I'm aware of how I'm watching my mind. And in that situation, sometimes kind of a interesting kind of transcendent experience happens. It's like most of us believe that whatever we are thinking is ourselves. I'm sitting here, I'm being interviewed, I'm sitting in a chair, I'm wearing this. I may have these worries and doubts and fears and hopes and everything else. That's a whole bunch of jumbling going on here. So John Kabat-Zinn simply said, let's create a simple process where you sit down and spend anywhere between 10 to 20 to 40 minutes watching whatever thought pops into your mind, and then he chose to bring yourself back to breathing. It's just as a way of anchoring yourself so that you're focusing your attention on how you were thinking, but let's not get caught up in that, because if you're worried about something and you're irritated about something, that just means you're lost in that particular thought process. So you bring your attention back to your breathing for a moment and then watch the next thought or feeling or memory or sensation that pops up. So that's your standard traditional definition of mindfulness.
So would you say that people get caught when you're talking about these thoughts and the worries and where they're going? Would you call that the monkey mind that people so often refer to in mindfulness, being able to kind of calm down that monkey mind?
Yeah. Now, neuroscience can help give you a more visual image of the different thought processes that go on in different parts of your brain. And we basically have two areas of conscious thinking. And this is the drawing that I use of basic brain networks. And the purple area that you see, along with that dot right there, this is called your executive network. This is the part of your brain that's consciously making decisions about what action to take to achieve specific goals. It's there specifically just to help you to organize your life and the world in a way so that you can get what you want. Now, if you are listening to me really intently right now, and if the audience is listening to me really intently right now, these two parts of your brain are the most active, and the rest of the brain is really, really quiet. Okay? But here's the interesting thing. You can't stay highly focused for more than a minute or two, because you'll use up all those neurochemicals necessary to keep you focused on the task. For me to be able to choose and articulate each word precisely in a way that I think you will be able to understand, that requires a lot of effort. So I can't have all the other processes that are kind of going on in the background, all the fantasies and imaginations and maybes and worries and pieces of memories about the past that are going on in the background to help me achieve what a particular goal I have. So after a minute or two, your mind wanders off. Okay? So a lot of people who have problems achieving their goals and tasks, they're spending too much time in that mind-wandering, daydreaming-like state. And very recently, really in the last few years, researchers have decided to identify that as, they'll call this the default mode network. And this is a huge area, whereas this part of your brain is lit up and everything else is quiet. This will then go quiet, and this other huge area will become very active. Now, they call it the default mode network because it kind of grew out of some of the brain scan studies and research that Andy Newberg and I were doing, and what Richie Davidson was doing around mindfulness practices. That, how do you compare? Here I am meditating on just pure awareness. I'm just being present. I'm observing my breath. Well, to take a brain scan, you have to compare one action to the other. So what action do you tell a meditator to do? Well, you tell them, well, don't meditate. Don't think about anything. Just sit here like this. And a very interesting phenomenon takes place. When you are lying down or resting and not particularly thinking about anything, the experience, what experience do you have? If you just, Heather, if you just stop thinking about anything or listening to me, how would you describe your experience of not doing anything?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on when that is. If I go lay down, then probably within 10 or 15 seconds, I'm going to think about my to-do list or things that I didn't do, or wondering tasks my kids are or aren't doing. I mean, there's a whole slew of things that come in. If you tell me not to do something, I'll focus on not doing something for a specific amount of time, and then my mind will wander.
Right. And so that's what, when your mind wanders, it becomes more active. So it was quite surprising. When I'm focused on a task, when I'm paying attention to something, most of my brain is kind of quiet. But when I sit back and relax and I don't try to do anything, most of my brain is really active, with the exception of these two areas. And it kind of goes back and forth and back and forth. We used to call that a resting state. This other researcher decided to call it a default mode state. Martin Seligman, who created, was the founder of positive psychology, he had a much better word for it. He called that the imagination network. So this huge pink area that they call the default mode, I'm calling the imagination network. And this is the part of your brain that's constantly dreaming up all kinds. One side is thinking about all the possible things that if you did it in this way, a positive outcome would happen. The other side is thinking about all the things that could go wrong if you did it some other particular way. So one side is always predicting a negative future. The other side is always predicting a positive future. When somebody is worried and getting upset, all they've done is to take their conscious attention, which can only look at a very little bit amount of information at one time. You have a choice. You can look at what you're worrying about or what you're hoping and desiring for. You can't do both at the same time. Mm-hmm. That's rather impossible. So when somebody is highly anxious, I like the word imagination network because it means that their thinking has been turned off and they're just up there in that daydreaming thing, constantly looking at all the things that might go wrong. And the thing about this imagination network, it's going about 20 or 30 times faster than you and I can think about it. So this is where the mindfulness practice comes in. That's very interesting. If I ask you to, okay, what I want you to do is deeply relax. So you have to have your body really relaxed. And we discovered that if you do a series of mindful yawns and you just immerse yourself in the experience of yawning, it turns out that it turns off the excessive amount of activity. If you're worrying too much, you're worrying less. If you're thinking too much about a goal, you're thinking a little less. So it creates literally kind of an ideal balance between these two. But the thing that controls that balance is this blue area that people are now calling the Salience Network. And in the center of this drawing, you'll see I have an asterisk. And there are two specific structures called the anterior cingulate and insula. And these are the areas that when you're doing a meditation practice, when you're doing a deep contemplative self-reflective activity, doing some form of mindfulness, that star lights up. And when that lights up, the newest research shows that that's what's creating the ideal balance between all of these other important networks in your brain. Your emotional networks, which is the green area down here, the motivational part of the brain, the thing that when you wake up, it's like, oh, I really want this, I desire this, to honor those passions. If you can figure out some particular way to stimulate that anterior cingulate and insula, to stimulate that salience network, then we can see in our brain scan studies that you have better control over your emotions. You're able to think more clearly without wandering off too often. And the easiest way to do that is to actually do super brief moments of mindfulness throughout the workday. These long 20 or 30-minute mindfulness things, first of all, takes a tremendous amount of dedication, and it might take you about 8 or 9 weeks before you actually have that experience of what is it like to kind of be here in the present moment? What is it like to actually watch my monkey mind? What is it like to see all those positive, negative thoughts and feelings wandering around, crashing into each other faster than I can ever put into words? So it turns out that little brief mindfulness exercises like mindful yawning or a super slow mindful movement forces your brain to turn off the activity, because it's an activity to do a mindful yawn. It's an activity to do a super slow movement or stretch. And the more you focus on that, you won't be in that obsessive form of workaholism that can lead to work burnout. And you're not getting lost in all of those worries and fears and hopes and fantasies and daydreams and artistic states and all that creative problem solving stuff that goes on up here. So your brain needs both of them. It needs to be able to focus attention on the goal and task, but it's going to get tired, so it has to go into that mind-wandering daydreaming. And in that state, this is where your brain, not your mind, this is your mind up here, your brain is figuring out what is the best way to get to that goal. So it's pulling up old memories from the past, but it's also putting together all of these potential prediction things in creative and unusual ways. And if you can find some way catching a glimpse of that creative problem-solving process, you'll achieve your goals much faster, much easier, with less stress. And that's why we teach this to Executive MBA students at my university.
Okay. So clearly there's a wealth of knowledge there. And I want to back up because I don't know if people really fully understand the importance of everything that you just said, because it's really amazing. So let me rewind, because I want to make sure I highlight on something very particular. A lot of people feel that mindfulness can equal meditation, and meditation is a form of mindfulness, but a lot of people feel that that's something they have to do. And if they're not a long-term practitioner, or there's a lot of people that have pictures of bald monks sitting on top of mountains that have mastered this over years, that if they don't achieve that level, they're not going to have results. And so if I break down what you just said, those small micro practices are actually more effective at balancing those networks and being able to tap in to both the mind and the brain to be able to balance between this creative moments as well as have this really focused, concentrated thinking. Is that accurate?
Yeah, but there's a drawback to being in that deep state of relaxed, mindful awareness. In that particular state, you're in the present moment. It feels wonderful. You're at peace. You're feeling serenity. But that yellow area on my drawing, the motivational center, is also turned off. It's like, hey, you've already achieved what that brain wants, which is pure, pleasurable serenity. But we've you and I, we've just been talking about it, and everyone has been listening to these words and thinking about it. And as your topic says, this is the power of thoughts. Yes, I can choose to have an optimistic thought. And I can simply say, I'm not going to focus on the negative things that will happen. I'm going to look at, for example, this time is a lot of, turmoil going on in the world. How can I sit back and look at that as a positive experience? Mm-hmm. Now I've shifted my attention from worrying about a negative future into thinking about how I might create or be involved with a positive future. Mm-hmm. It's a different kind of thinking, but we're still thinking about what is the experience of anything I've just said. And so in an experiential sense, you have to guide yourself or your student or a classroom or your client into an experience where they can have a visceral sense of everything I've just said. If you want to, I'll guide you and everybody who is watching this into those states so that you can feel how your brain can shift between these three key networks: your thinking network, your imagination network, and your awareness network. Each one feels different, but you have to be able to observe it. Mm-hmm. So right now I'm busy. I'm generating so many thoughts and exciting things. I have a lot of things going on in my imagination, and I'm organizing it and I'm orchestrating it to create a fascinating presentation for everyone. But if I ask everyone, including you, to close your eyes right now, mm-hmm. just share with me. Think about how much you even remember of what I just said. In fact, Heather, and anybody who's listening, can any of you repeat with accuracy anything I was jabbering about for the last 15 minutes? So Heather, you get to be the guinea pig. Can you tell me with accuracy anything that I said about these networks in your brain, the difference between the power of thoughts and, thinking and imagination and awareness?
Well, to repeat everything you said, no, not going to be able to do that.
Can you repeat a single sentence accurately from what I said?
No, not going to be able to do that either. I can repeat my summary of what I thought I heard you say. And if I kind of take a look at, and keep in mind that there's so many different terminologies that people come into play, but you were talking about what stuck out for me most was the discovery of really that default mode network and how you renamed it based upon Martin Seligman's work on positive psychology, is how that's the imagination network.
So pause right there. So that's the thing that kind of captured your attention, right? Mm-hmm. Were you thinking about that, or is that simply something that seemed to stand out?
That stood out because I loved the renaming of it. And I knew what default mode network is. So your renaming of that stood out.
The thing that stands out is that blue area, the salience networks. That's that part of your brain that attached specific value to those selected words from what I said. Now, here's the cool thing for everybody who's watching this. Everyone, close your eyes for a moment and just doing a yawn and a stretch and kind of relax yourself. Take a moment and think about everything I've been saying, and notice how much energy it takes to think about anything I've said. You have to sort those through. What do you remember? Is it correct? Is it accurate? Or whatever else? That thinking process is going on all the time. That's one state. I just want you to take a moment and think about whatever you were thinking about right now. And now deliberately let your mind wander. Don't try to think about anything. Just notice all the different partial thoughts and feelings that are wandering around. Now, Heather, you can be my guinea pig. Just share with me, what's the first thought that pops in your mind by not trying to think about anything at all?
How much fun it is to be able to come up with new things without trying too hard.
So everyone, pay attention to whatever thought popped into your mind. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to yawn and stretch, relax. I want you to let that thought fade away. So you're coming back into this state of simply being aware of how your mind is thinking. And what's the next thought or feeling or memory or sensation that just rambles mindlessly into your mind?
Creativity is the word that pops up.
Now, I'm really good at this. So if I was to sit back and do mindfulness the way it was designed to get to, I would sit here and go, I feel myself sitting in the chair. There's some pressure in my eyes. I hear a bit of a humming in the background. I'm thinking, is anybody even interested in what I'm doing? Another thought comes in, I don't care. I'm just wandering and daydreaming. Oh, and suddenly there's a pause. It kind of feels like there's no thoughts going on at all. And in that pause right there, I was up here in that imagination network. That's all the different thoughts and feelings that are going on 30 times faster than I can think about it. Then what I asked you to do is to use your intuition. What did you or it find to be the most interesting in anything I've said? I'm going to guide you and everybody else through this experience, because that intuition part is, again, part of that Salience Network. It's part of that mindfulness state. So if you yawn and stretch and relax, do whatever you can, just to come into a sense of awareness, ask your intuition. It's like an inner voice that's almost wordless. What have you found to be the most interesting or useful in anything I've just said? And just sit back for about 15 seconds and allow anything to pop into your mind. You've already had one thing that came to your mind, Heather. So, as we all do that, we'll just see what the next intuitive insight is that comes to you. And I just use the bell to help people to focus in to the sound rather than their thoughts. So share with me something else that you have personally found, or shall I say, your brain has found interesting and useful, something brand new, something you maybe not even have thought about until this very second.
Yeah, what just came up in that exercise, and my thought, my mind tells me I've been through this process before. I understand the process. But really allowing myself to explore and find what is going to come up. It's an interesting thing, because the first thing you think of is, am I doing this right? And then if I allow myself to breathe through and just really relax, and I have the visual of your brain diagram. So I'm just trying to relax into that. So to answer your question, relaxing and fun is what just came up for me in that moment.
So there's all kinds of very practical applications for this. If you're hard at work, and because we know that that's going to exhaust all of the neurochemicals necessary to stay focused and attentive and to carry out a task with the least amount of stress and the greatest amount of performance and productivity, it's really important that every 20 or 30 minutes, you can set like a mindfulness clock on your cell phone. And when that goes off, all you have to do is take 10 seconds to do a yawn. And our research, we focus on yawning rather than breathing, because yawning turns out to be what's called a thermoregulatory mechanism. When you have too much anxiety going on, or too much focus going on, and you're feeling too stressed out, there's actually too much activity going on in your brain, which simply means those neurons are firing too much and too fast. And it actually generates a lot of heat. Yawning increases cerebral blood flow. And like a radiator, it actually cools down those overly active neurons, particularly if you get angry. You say you're hot-headed, we can actually measure it. And yes, the temperature in your brain has actually gone up. So a yawn can get rid of anger, irritability, too much procrastination, which is, again, bouncing back and forth between maybe I should do this, maybe I shouldn't do this, blah, 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 blah. It's going on all the time up here. Just 10 seconds of a couple of mindful yawns, or just a super slow movement, or focusing on a deep inner value, or even just doing something incredibly pleasurable, that's enough to pull back from that overly active imagination or your overly obsessed workaholism, to take a 10-second break where you just become aware of what you're feeling in the present moment. Then, if you throw yourself back into work, you'll see that your work productivity and stress levels go down for the whole rest of the day. So that's why we give all of our Executive MBA students who are running multi-million-dollar companies, 2 or 3 times an hour, when you hear that bell, do just one mindful yawn, just paying attention to the yawn and how it shifts your mental state. One super slow stretch or movement, so slow that you could feel all the little tiny aches and pains. Or focus on a deep inner value. We can all do that together. If everyone just pauses for a moment and you do that yawn and that stretch and come back into the present moment. Ask your intuition, what is your deepest, innermost value? A question we rarely ask ourselves. And yet the part of the brain that we're stimulating, that Salience Network, is not only your social brain, it's also the part of your brain that becomes the most activated when you're engaged in a spiritual practice. So your deepest, innermost values is your own personal spirituality. They aren't the values given to you by a church or a religion or your parents or your teachers. These are the values that your own brain is oriented towards. So everybody has a unique set of values, but they're always complementary to everybody else's. So what's the first deep innermost value that pops into your mind, Heather?
Love.
And mine is a new one for today. Usually it's compassion or peace or even bliss. This one is going with the flow. And again, everyone's watching this. Just take a moment and ask your intuition, what value word comes up for you? And it can be anything. It could be trust, integrity. For one person, it was grandmother, because she had all kinds of behaviors that that person wanted to model. If you immerse yourself in that word and even repeat it, whether it be love or flow or integrity or in a work situation, just focus, focus, focus. The repetition of that word, if it has deep meaning and value to you, literally turns on 1,200 stress-reducing genes and about 1,000 immune-enhancing genes. And there are three studies on this, 2 of them from Harvard, to support this, so it's actually replicated. There's the power of a single word. And so you can anchor yourself in the deep inner value as another way to help balance out those brain networks that I've been talking about. But it's important to have the experience of what that value feels like. So if you come back to whatever inner value that you have and immerse yourself in the sense of that, in a sense of love or a sense of peacefulness or calmness or even going with the flow. Imagine that that's an experience and let it flow through you. And I'm willing to bet it's giving everyone who's watching this and you almost a profound, tingly, almost a sense of enlightenment experience coming up.
Yeah, I feel lighter. I can feel more grounded in my body. And I immediately felt more relaxed and calm in my body as well.
It is that particular experience that has been left out of our educational system. So if I was to reinvent the way we teach kids, I would sit here and lecture as I have done right now, but I would pause every 5 minutes and I would ask all those kids to close their eyes and let their mind wander and just to write down on a sheet of paper, what did their brain, not their mind, find interesting? I'm going to encourage that child to give more attention to what they found was important to their unique, neurology, rather than trying to impose what I think they should learn or know. And in that experiential sense, it stimulates the passion, the motivational centers. You're getting releases of dopamine when you feel that pleasurable sense of whatever word or experience you're having. And that dopamine is what propels you to be even more successful in achieving those things that bring you the greatest degree of satisfaction.
So we're right in the middle of this experience to anchor our body, to be able to connect. A question that comes up for me as I'm thinking it through is, what do I do when I'm in a less than desirable situation? You talked about putting a mindfulness bell on your phone and stopping every so often throughout the hour. And I know when I work with clients, that's one of the very first things I explain to them is at least once an hour, take a good stretch break, yawn break, really be able to give your mind that rest. But if I'm in a conflict or I'm in a situation that I'm starting to feel myself getting an emotion, how do I balance needing that break and giving my blood flow to my brain when I'm in this emotion that I'm not thinking that?
Okay, I'd like everyone to think about a conflictual situation that sounds like it would be impossible for you to go into this state of calm, serene pleasantness. Let's see what comes to my mind. Oh, it's easy. All I have to do is think about something that my wife or my kids are doing, and I easily can find something to be irritable about. For you, what popped into your mind? What type of conflictual situation would you say you'd have the most difficulty coming into that state of mindful, relaxed awareness?
Well, of course, the easy answer is my kids, but to be completely honest, and this was vulnerable saying out loud, especially to the world, but it's dealing with my children's father, so my former spouse.
So let's just use that. I'll make you my client now. And this is part of what I train my neuro coaching students. What I want you to do, hold in consciousness that irritability towards spouse, kids, whichever one you want. But what I want you to do, I want you to yawn and stretch and maybe even have a soft pillow or something like that. You can move yourself into this incredibly pleasurable sense and allow yourself to immerse into the sense of irritability and describe to me what happens when you pull together pleasure and you're consciously and deliberately allowing yourself to experience that irritability. So we're not doing anything about it. That's what awareness is. I want you to, instead of thinking about what irritates you, I want you to be aware of the irritability as you remain relaxed, in a somewhat pleasurable state. And then share with me the first intuitive thought that comes to mind about your irritability. So again, we're using that, that value part of your brain which is always calm and serene. There's always a part of you that's serene. And it'll offer you all kinds of sage advice. Most of it is valuable. Some of it's silly. What comes to your mind? If you can just do something pleasurable and stay relaxed and immerse yourself into the flow of irritability wherever it takes you. And then intuitively share with me, what does your intuition whisper to you about your irritability?
Well, my first thought before I actually allow myself to listen to my intuition was that I can't feel pleasure and pain at the same time. But if I allow myself to really be guided by that, the intuition said it's not that bad. That irritability, it's not that big of a deal.
Okay. Now, just follow your imagination. Why is it not a big deal? What's the thing that your intuition says? I don't want you to think about it. Just see what pops up. Why is the irritability not a big deal? And again, if you could do a gentle rocking or movement or just stroking your fingertips with your hands, which is something I want you to do, by the way. Any of you who is having a conflict with somebody, whether it's at work or at home, you can do this underneath the table, because what Heather said is absolutely correct. You cannot experience pleasure and irritability or pain at the same time. But your brain is always geared towards seeking pleasure. So what it does, you actually have pleasure nerves. It interrupts your brain's ability to recall painful, disturbing, irritating, negative memories from the past. Because whatever you're bringing up right now, it's not happening to you right now. It's just you and I are talking. You're pulling up a memory of that irritability. This will interrupt it. In that interruption, you have the freedom to look at the situation entirely differently. And this is easier to do with two people, where you kind of dialogue back and forth. So what's the very next thought that comes to you about that irritability?
It just, what keeps coming up for me is it's not worth it. It's the energy isn't worth it.
So can you visualize yourself working into the most irritating moment that you can imagine, but staying in this state of relaxation? I mean, you have to slow everything down. You're going to have to actually walk into the room slower. You're going to have to, the best way to control your thinking is to simply count each word or thought on your fingers and pause after 10 or 20. What happens? Visualize yourself in that situation where the person is doing absolutely everything that you can't stand it. Kids are screaming and hitting each other. The husband is refusing to do the dishes. And immerse yourself in a sense of pleasure with all of those kids screaming around you. All of the inattention. Nobody's following your rules, respecting your boundaries. Do something pleasurable, keep yawning, keep stretching. We're practicing it in your imagination.
I just keep visualizing an outer body experience where it doesn't affect me and I calmly respond. That's what I visualize occurring.
So the only thing that's missing from this, and this is how neurocoaching will work, is, okay, you can ask your intuition two questions. One is, how might you sabotage yourself? So let's say you're going to bump into that situation tonight or tomorrow. What's the first thing that pops into your mind? How might you end up just bringing back that old irritability that's now part of your memory and not even part of what's going on in the real world?
Just snapping into instant irritability, just reacting versus responding.
No, ask your intuition if it would be hard or easy for you to kind of stay in this altered state the next time it happens.
My intuition says that the habit of the emotion is real, and retraining myself in this new pleasurable, calming state where I respond versus react. So it's my intuition first said that habit is more of that knee-jerk reaction, or maybe even the desire.
Well, you have the reaction over here, which you know is irritating to you. I mean, I certainly know it. You have the notion that I could respond in a different way. But there's a third thing that you can do. This is a key part of mindfulness training. When you're in that state of awareness and observing, you're neither reacting nor responding. You're just accepting it. Now, for me, I had one of the most profound discoveries in my life, because I had spent way too many years, actually a decade, in different forms of therapy, trying to get rid of all this worry and anxiety and fears and doubts and, concern about how other people think about me. And after all that time, I gave up. I said, I guess I'm going to be a highly anxious person. Literally that day, and this is about 30 years ago, my anxiety fell in half and has never came back. So having half the amount of anxiety was great, even though my wife will always complain about the other half. So that acceptance, even if you just do it for a moment and you accept the conflict that you have, knowing that there's a part of you that if you are being aware of, you don't have to do anything. That awareness state in that acceptance thing allows you to look at the situation entirely differently and allows you to use your intuition, which is also tied into that anterior cingulate and the insula. They're called von Economo neurons. They're fast, intuitive processing parts of your brain that can access the non-conscious parts of your imagination. That's all about creative problem solving. And in that state, you can watch and glimmer if you ask, but you actually have to ask your non-conscious part of your brain from the state of awareness for an insight, an intuition, a suggestion. Mm-hmm. And if you do it with another person, and we do this in the business community, that's a stand-up, we go around the room. Here's a problem we can't resolve. Everyone is yawning and stretching and relaxing and just intuitively tossing out a thing that comes to mind. And we'll go around, and maybe each person will give 5 or 6 intuitive things. I'll be writing them all down on a whiteboard. And then if we all look at that whiteboard together, an amazing thing happens. We'll all agree that 2 or 3 of them are a worthwhile solution to that problem that we weren't able to solve. And the whole process takes about 10 or 20 minutes to do. So we don't have to spend all that time in meditation in the morning and then go back into our work situation and just stressfully and habitually do all the same things. Instead, we're just taking these small, mini, micro mindfulness breaks to make sure we're physically relaxed, mentally relaxed, and just a few seconds of becoming aware of anything our intuition suggests might be useful and helpful for the next hour of work. That's rather simple. And the simplest way to describe that is all you're doing is consciously choosing to shift between those 3 networks, the purple one, the blue one, the orange one. So I'm thinking about this. I'm becoming aware of all of the different fantasies and imaginations going on. I'm going to go back to thinking about it, be aware of. And every time we take that moment to be aware of, that's the network that all of the neuroscience research is pointing to, creates the best balance between your thinking, your imagination, your emotions, and your motivation. Mm-hmm. So now, the whole new language of neuroscience, is brain network theory, is that almost every form of psychological and neurological problem is an imbalance between those key networks interacting with each other.
So again, if we go back to really that base definition of mindfulness, it's not only creating these micro practices in those moments to help find clarity, but it's also reorganizing the habit and setting it where we go to the practice versus something that doesn't serve us. Is that neuroplasticity?
Yes, it's perfect. Because what is a habit? A habit is a behavior that's oftentimes combined with a bunch of beliefs around it too, that get formed into a memory. So they're automatically being pulled up when we're trying to accomplish a particular task. Okay, and most of them are helpful and some of them are unhelpful. Mm-hmm. If we relax and simply become aware of any habit we're having, and in specific, any negative memory that's popping up, by being aware of that memory, we recall that memory into our thinking network, into our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. That memory becomes unstable. And if you do something that is different from the way you habitually react to your negative thoughts and feelings, that memory cannot be reconsolidated in the same way. So this is very applicable to trauma. Mm-hmm. Trauma is a memory that's pushing itself up. You don't have control over it. So, I guide my clients into that deep state of relaxation, and I'm always having them do something pleasurable as they describe an extraordinarily painful part of the past experience. Mm-hmm. And what happens is that it strips the emotional content out of the memory. So this is Joseph Ledoux's memory reconsolidation process. And Ledoux is one of the most famous neuroscientists who, you know of him because anything you think about the amygdala, which is now a popular word, he's the person that originally researched that. Mm-hmm. So this is, in my opinion, a Nobel Prize winning discovery, and it's very easy to do. Do something pleasurable in a situation that normally causes you stress, irritability, fear. The pleasure interrupts the emotional part of the memory, and then you can take that in and just have the most wonderful, pleasurable experience watching your kids scream at each other.
And who doesn't want that, right?
There's a old psychoanalytic joke where a psychoanalyst is walking down the street with a friend of his in downtown Hollywood, and a little midget runs out and bites the psychoanalyst on the backside. The analyst doesn't react at all to it. The little guy runs off. Friend looks at him and goes, huh? Walks on another bite. Same midget runs out. Bites the analyst on the ass. Doesn't respond at all. The third time it happens, his friend says, I don't understand you. Why aren't you doing anything about that? And the analyst said, why should I? It's his problem, not mine.
And that's what I think a lot of people desire to get in those states of bliss, if you will. And to be able to be in such a calm state where they're unaffected and unfazed. And I'll say this, and it's no secret of some of the past trauma. I haven't shared a lot of detail publicly, but one of the reasons you and I connected way back when I was really trying to do my own self-work and discovery, and you've helped me significantly through some of that trauma and being able to reframe it. And that really set the foundation for me of researching more of neuroscience and NeuroWisdom and being able to help not just from an emotional perspective, but to help in all my relationships and business and my career. So thank you so much. But I'm saying that as a testimony. I haven't achieved that. If a midget bit me on the ass right now, I'm not sure I would be that calm, but at least I know I have the skills to continue to work.
No, in reality, if somebody comes up to you and bites you on your butt, take your foot and kick them right into the groin. I mean, it's just unacceptable. But I moved from psychology research because there are 500 different schools of psychology with 50 different theoretical frameworks about what the problem is and how to solve it, into neuroscience, because neuroscience can help to say, well, okay, there are certain key principles about how all those different psychological things are working. So it becomes a simpler framework. So while I'm teaching, whether it be to clients who have personal problems or issues of abuse, or to students who are working with others in there, is that something as simple as a brief mindful yawn can clear away being trapped in that excessive worrisomeness or mind wandering where you can't even focus on something. A super slow stretch, and by the way, if you move really slowly and you find an area that's painful, if you yawn into it, quite surprisingly, for about 80% of the people, the pain totally disappears. It actually turns out that there are 5 to 12 pain centers in your brain, and that half of those are regulated by the process of yawning. I mean, in the womb at 16 weeks, the fetus is yawning, and if it doesn't yawn, the child comes out with brain damage. Yawning is your brain's way of handling excessive neurological stress. It's so simple.
Yeah.
Fortunately, even though who's the Greek philosopher of Hippocrates? He even suggested way back in 400 BC that yawning was a way to get rid of all of those negative fluids that were causing you psychological and physical distress. Unfortunately, religion seemed to come in many parts of the world saying, no, when you yawn, demons can come into you. If you sneeze, they'll be put out.
Mm-hmm.
And so yawning has been overlooked as one of the most probably simplest and most essential strategies to use. So for 8 years in a row, our Executive MBA students have said the 3 things that they have found to be the most helpful to reduce stress immediately in 10 seconds while they're engaged in doing their multi-million-dollar managerial spots is that mindful yawn or a super slow stretch. And when I mean super slow, I mean you have to move so slow. The slower you move, the more you feel. That'll bring you out of that busyness and excessive worry and thinking. The inner values exercise, because again, it only takes a few seconds to pick a word that helps to ground you, and you use that value to guide you. And the one they hate the most, but they also find the most essential, is putting that mindfulness app on it, because nobody even wants, in this busy world, nobody even wants to take, 10 seconds to stop.
Yeah.
But if, we give them this assignment, do this for 10 days. And in our class, everyone will say, 90% will say by day 4, there's always somebody who will say, what in the world, is Mark having us to do in this accounting class or an intensive MBA program? But by day 4, that same person will say, oh, wow, this should be taught to every MBA student across the country. Something that simple is that effective. It's one of the interesting reasons why mindfulness has been so fully embraced and embraced much faster in the business community than in the psychology and the self-help community. A business person will try anything, no matter how silly it is, and if it actually gets rid of your stress and increases your productivity and performance, they're going to do it. They don't care about the brain science behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to kind of piggyback off of that, it's students across the world, not just from a business setting, but any setting. And that's why I find this work so fascinating, because the more we can spread it, the more we can talk about it, the more effective in helping reduce that stress later in life. Now, something I want to go back to just really quickly, and I know we probably need to start wrapping up. We could talk for hours and hours because you are a wealth of knowledge. But when you go back to that one point, the inner values exercise, and really taking that time, but then in addition, going through the hourly or half hour even, just having those moments of yawning and stretching and daydreaming. What about when you're in a high stress situation and yawning may seem inappropriate, or it's, in some situations it might even seem rude, and people are afraid to take the time to do that? Often, especially in mindfulness, meditation, and teachings, it's taught to just do breathing exercises. So is that as effective, or how do they combat that when they can't yawn and do these super slow stretches?
I found breathing utterly boring. Watching my breathing, my mind will continue to, do whatever else. But if yawning doesn't work, the next best thing to do that is anything that's pleasurable. So that's why if you're in a business meeting and maybe the boss is screaming at you, whatever else, if you do this underneath the table and you can actually like wiggle your toes, everyone try wiggling your toes right now. The moment you feel some kind of physical pleasure, again, you cannot focus on your worrisome aspect, and it will diminish the actual insult that the person might be giving to you at the time. And that's enough to keep you grounded and focused enough so that you don't get trapped up in that fight or flight response.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. That's fantastic.
And you can always keep echoing that inner value over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. Although I was being deposed one time by an attorney for some situation. Boy, was he nasty. I mean, and I thought I would go in and I would try to be like the Dalai Lama, peaceful, peaceful, peaceful. And I did remain peaceful, and I came out quite traumatized from that. But I should have just stood up, and I should have used that psychoanalytic joke and said, this is your problem, not mine. I have a headache. Goodbye. You can bring me back on some other day. And that would really piss them off.
Yes.
And that's another thing that you can do too. When you have, it's again another neurological function. When you feel attacked, whether it's real or imaginary, a part of your brain is going to go into a defensive thing. Mm-hmm. It might freeze, which could be very dangerous for you, so you have a choice. Run away if you possibly can. If you can't do that, then you're going to fight. Mm-hmm. So you can run down the scenarios of all the mean, nasty things you could do to that person while you're doing something pleasurable or whatever else. So you can savor mm-hmm. the destructiveness that's going on in your imagination because it's not real. Sometimes people are afraid that if they focus in on a negative thought or feeling, it's going to manifest itself in reality. No, if you obsess on it long enough, that negativity will cause the rest of your brain to act to those negative thoughts as if they were real insults and threats coming in from the outside world. Mm-hmm. So again, another simple strategy is, okay, you're feeling threatened, whatever else, yawn, stretch, relax, and look around and remind yourself it might actually be safe in the present moment. Mm-hmm. And that's when I teach my neurocoach students, particularly how to work with traumas. It's one of the strategies that we use. Okay, the memory can be so powerful that it feels so real that the person can't disconnect. But you can interrupt that and just open your eyes and remind yourself, hey, here's my deep inner value. Yes, this is a memory. I'm in a safe place right now. And if you gently walk a person scene by scene through a painful memory, you'll discover that any trauma isn't just one trauma. There can be 50 traumas in 5 minutes, 50 insults to you from that person. But if you stay in this relaxed, mindful state, and you pretty much need somebody to guide you through it, and you need to be in dialogue with somebody else, you can't do this silently. This is another key part of this different form of mindfulness practice. We're doing a mindful dialogue with each other. So you and the other person, whether it's a friend or a colleague or a coach or a therapist, what if we both stayed in this relaxed state of mindful awareness, following our intuition, briefly dipping into painful aspects, coming back to a deep inner value, intuitively sharing the little pieces of insights and discoveries along the way. You can oftentimes cover in a single coaching session what might normally take you 20 or 30 weeks in the traditional coaching or therapeutic model. Mm-hmm. That's the cool thing about neuroscience. This huge, complex thing that we can barely figure out operates by some of the simplest rules. We can't hang on to too many words or thoughts at one time. We don't savor the positive experiences in our life. That's what's essential to form strong positive memories. Your brain isn't inclined to form positive memories. It basically takes the strongest emotional experiences, and those will become your memory. So a strong negative emotional experience has far more weight and value, because it's a potential threat, than a nice, pleasant experience. You have to overly accentuate that pleasant experience. You have to immerse yourself in that little brief moment and make it much larger than it actually is to form a strong enough memory. It has to be about 3 or 4 times more powerful than the negative thought or feeling in order to balance it out. And that's a positive psychology technique. If you want, it's called the positivity ratio. For every negative thought or feeling that you have, if you generate 3 to 5 positive thoughts and feelings, you will train yourself quite quickly to become an irrational optimist. An irrational optimist is far more successful in their personal life and in the world.
And those are everything you've been talking about today, obviously you've incorporated into your MBA students, but you've also created this whole entire neuro coaching platform. And I know you have a lot of free resources as well. Can you talk to that a little bit? Because I know, for example, this book of yours, NeuroWisdom, it's one of my favorite books. And I know you have Words Can Change Your Brain and Born to Believe. You have so many other things, but I know you have an interactive as well. So can you talk about that, just a little bit of resources and how you've incorporated that in your neuro coaching training?
So the 3 programs we've developed, and this was developed again, a combination with Andy Newberg and our brain scan research at UPenn and at Washington or at Jefferson University, and Chris Manning, who established the Executive MBA program at LMU. What we first created was a set of about 56 very brief mindfulness exercises. It's an audio, an audio recording you can listen to, one a day, just guiding you into, it'll guide you through how to go through 3 mindful yawns, how to communicate using 10 words and 10 fingers, focusing in on a deep sense of gratitude, for example. Little tiny mindfulness exercises that you can play with. You have 58 to choose from. That's the experiential guidance. It's still a little bit more passive. Then we created the NeuroWisdom book to document, there are 400 endnotes in the back of that book showing how to bring these different types of mindfulness into the workplace, into social arenas, all kinds of, money games that you could play. It's called neuroeconomics. And then, because reading a book tends to be passive in one way, and listening to a bunch of audio dialogues will give you that experience, but unless you take an active role, it's going to fall away. What if we were to combine it all together? So this program is called The Power of NeuroWisdom. So it includes, 250 pages of text, but it is sprinkled with a whole bunch of audio exercise. So you read a little bit, push that button, it's an interactive flip book. It'll guide you through the experience that was just described, because nobody ever does the exercises in a book. They just read over it, think about it. So they can experience it. And then we also have built in a number of, video programs of guiding you through it, explaining it, showing some of the different models of the brain. So you're immersed in what we call brain-based experiential learning. And that's the course and the product that I'm most pleased about now. And yes, all of that you can find on my website.
And your website is Mark Robert Waldman, right?
MarkRobertWaldman.com.
Perfect. I'll make sure to put that in the footnotes of the podcast and on our websites as well.
And there's a whole bunch of free ebooks there as well, both some that I created and some that I have a neuro coach training and certification program. And so one of the homework assignments is you have to create an ebook to invent some new brain-based, evidence-based strategies in a new way that will help others. So you'll find a good, 7 or 8 different ebooks you can download on dealing with work burnout, procrastination, and 10 mind-blowing discoveries about the human brain.
It's amazing. Are there any final, I guess, tips or words of wisdom that you want to embark? This is every single thing is just pure gold.
Don't forget the importance of checking in with your intuition and asking it what it finds the most valuable in any experience you've just had. So why don't we all together one more time, all of you who are watching and listening, close your eyes, try one mindful yawn. Notice how that yawn feels. And after you've yawned, just sit back and notice the subtle change in your mental state or your mood. Savor what it's like to just kind of be more in the present moment, a little calmer, and ask your intuition. Think about just one thing that you have found to be the most interesting, the most potentially useful and valuable in anything that we've been talking about today. And let it whisper to you what that is. And make sure you write it down, because you will forget almost anything you discover in this state of relaxed, mindful awareness. And all I want you to do is, after we've concluded this, to do it 3 more times. You can ask your intuition for a brand new insight anytime you want. And it will always feel different than the way you think about something. So it's just an impression coming through you. It comes from a part of your brain that's not language-based. That's one of the ways that you know it just feels interesting. So for me, I think my most important takeaway would be, please, don't try to remember everything I've just said. You can certainly watch the video again. Just take a moment and intuitively say, which of all the little tiny things I've suggested would you like to experiment with in the next 24 hours? If it works and it feels well, try it again. And then use your intuition and imagination to create any variation of it you want. You do not need to meditate the way somebody else tells you to meditate. The research also shows if you create your own form of mindfulness or meditation or exercise regime, you'll stick to it better, you'll be more effective, and your brain always likes to do something in a different way. So don't get stuck in doing any of these exercises habitually, because we've done brain scan studies to show that when you habitually do any form of meditation and prayer, absolutely nothing changes in your brain.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. Mark, I cannot express enough gratitude for this segment. This is pure gold, absolute words of wisdom. Thank you so much. I cannot possibly express enough gratitude.
And be careful of all those midgets running around biting other parts of your brain.
Good enough. Good enough. Thank you so much, Mark.
Take care.
Thank you so much for joining us. Oh my goodness, was that a lot? So many golden nuggets. Absolutely a tremendous amount of information. And one of the things that really stuck out for me, and I hope sticks out for you, is that intuition. It's always there, and it's just waiting to help guide us. And Mark's right. If we take some time and really just settle inside of that presence, that awareness, and if we think about mindfulness from an awareness perspective of being in the now and being in that present, then we're able to really tap into that intuition. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you again for Mark. You can go to his website and get copies of his books. You can download some of the NeuroWisdom techniques, freebies, and other goodies that he has at markrobertwaldman.com. If I can be of any assistance to you, or if you would like additional help in guiding through some of these techniques, please feel free to reach out to me, heatherjcrider.com, and of course here at Go Reflect Yourself. Until next time, thank you so much for being here. And remember, your thoughts matter. Your thoughts matter, your experiences matter, and you matter. So thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Go Reflect Yourself. For more inspired action or to stay in touch, head on over to goreflectyourself.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at #HeatherJCrider or heatherjcrider.com. Until next time, this is Heather J. Crider challenging you to go reflect yourself.